It's time for the whole 9 yards. Hello again, everyone. I'm Ralph Ventre, ready to deliver the whole 9 yards on Northeast Conference football. It's an ever-important episode. Only 2 weeks remain in the regular season. This is the next to last Saturday. All 9 teams are in action. 3 non-conference games, 3 NEC contests, a game of the week, a possible championship clincher. We have a lot to break down. Let's kick off our opening drive. 3 non-conference contests. We'll tackle those first. LIU at Villanova. It's a Friday night affair. The LIU Sharks are coming off a bye week. Most certainly found that bye week useful, as the Sharks have been ravaged by injuries throughout the season. LIU completed the NEC portion of its season schedule back in Week 10, but it won't get any easier for Brian Collins' team. They'll take on the number 13 program in the FCS. Villanova, 7-3 on the year, firmly in the FCS playoff picture. They'll give LIU, a first-year FCS program, a look at what it takes to be a perennial contender at this level. Now, checking in on Merrimack, the Warriors were idle last week. This week, they host an old Division II rival as Franklin Pierce comes to North Andover, Mass. It'll be a special day at Duane Stadium. It'll be Senior Day, honoring the group that kicked off Merrimack's move to Division I. Seniors like wide receiver Marquis Spence, who has had a phenomenal campaign, at least 4 receptions in every game this season for Spence. He had a 16-catch day at Lehigh. More recently, 12 receptions in a win over Big South member Presbyterian. Spence, one of the more recognizable names in the Merrimack senior class, as is Eric Brown, offensive tackle. He's been a rock on the left side of the line for the Warriors for 4 seasons now, and a number of his classmates have also made contributions to this special season for Merrimack, and those seniors will get their special day against Franklin Pierce in Week 12. One more non-conference contest. It involves Sacred Heart. The Pioneers have guaranteed themselves a winning NEC record. Now they step out of league play one more time, looking for a 3rd win over a Patriot League team this season. SHU already took care of Lafayette and Bucknell earlier in the year, and in those 2 victories, SHU sophomore running back Julius Chestnut went wild. Chestnut currently leads the nation in rush yards with 1,224. In those 2 wins over Patriot League teams, he had 5 TDs and nearly 300 combined yards from scrimmage. This week, he tries to add Lehigh to the list of victims. One thing to keep an eye on in this Sacred Heart Lehigh matchup, it's the quarterback position. Sacred Heart starter Logan Marshy missed the Week 11 win against Wagner due to injury. Redshirt freshman Marquez McCray filled in admirably. So we'll see who it is in Week 12 when Sacred Heart looks to make it 3-0 against the Patriot League. 3 conference games. We start with the Duquesne Dukes heading east to Smithfield, Rhode Island. Duquesne looks to rebound after suffering its first league loss last week at the hands of Steel City rival Robert Morris. Now, as for that setback at Robert Morris, Duquesne allowed 41 points, but that's not a reflection of the Dukes' defensive performance. In fact, the Dukes' D played rather well against Robert Morris, allowing only 12 first downs. They held the Colonials under 6 yards per pass, under 4 yards per rushing attempt. That Duquesne defense, well, for the season, it has allowed the 10th fewest pass yards in the FCS. That nationally ranked unit will present Bryant with a daunting task. As for the Bulldogs, they're coming off a bye week, and there is no doubt that the time off has been beneficial to the team's health.
We've got a lot of injuries, a lot of season-ending injuries. Our entire skill offensively from spring football is done. They have been for half the season. Our biggest thing right now isn't so much we're paper thin, but it's making that paper stronger. Right now we're trying to get our, even though we're paper thin at a lot of spots, these guys are playing week in, week out, beat up, and we need to take this opportunity to heal up a little bit and maybe get a guy or two back at some spots to make us a little bit deeper, so we can put on a good final push these last 2 ball games.
Next, for our featured matchup on ESPN3, Wagner heads out to Loretto, PA, where the St. Francis Red Flash are waiting and hungry. Both of these teams are coming off NEC road losses in Week 11. For St. Francis, it was a third overtime loss this season. Although the Red Flash haven't been able to pile up the wins, Wagner head coach Jason Hoteling has some high praise for Chris Valerial's club.
I think St. Francis, they lost an overtime game last week to Central Connecticut, 38-31, I believe. They lost an overtime game to Robert Morris, an overtime game to Sacred Heart. So I think these guys are athletically probably the best team in the league, from an athletic standpoint, both sides of the ball, all 3 phases. I think defensively they look a lot like us as far as some of their blitzing schemes and all that, and they have great athletes on the defensive side of the ball. So offensively, receivers, if you look at their receivers and their tight end and their offensive line, they certainly have ability.
Now, one of those receivers that Coach Haas was alluding to, that's Rayshawn Henry. We'll talk about him later on in the show. But for now, how about this SFU quarterback, Jason Brown? He was highlighted in the Stock Rising segment of our show earlier in the month, and he continues to tear it up. The sophomore signal caller, 4 straight games with at least 3 touchdown passes, only 1 interception over that span, 12 TDs to only 1 INT. Something tells me that's a pretty impressive ratio. And in that 4-game stretch, 315 pass yards per outing. Jason Brown has certainly kept Wagner's defensive staff up at night. But in all fairness, he'll face some heat from that Seahawks pass rush. After all, they have the most prolific sack artist in NEC history, Cam Gill, up to 34 sacks, obliterating the former NEC record. Of course, there's Chris Williams as well, does a nice job of pushing the pocket up front. Linebacker Santoni Graham. The Wagner defense is loaded with senior leaders up front, and they'll have to get some pressure on the passer in order to slow down a Red Flash attack that's been thriving under its sophomore quarterback. This one isn't the featured matchup on ESPN3, but it certainly carries plenty of meaning. What else would you expect when 5-0 meets 5-0? Robert Morris heading to New Britain, Connecticut to take on Central Connecticut State. Before we dive into the details of the matchup, to put it simply, there is a trophy at stake on Saturday. The winner of this game will clinch at least a share of the Northeast Conference crown. For Robert Morris, they can take it one step further. A head-to-head win over CCSU would give Robert Morris the NEC's automatic bid to the FCS playoffs. Meanwhile, a CCSU win would guarantee the Blue Devils a share of the title, but as for clinching the AQ, there would still be a little more work to do to that end. As for the battle on the field in New Britain, well, the CCSU pass game is one of the most efficient in all of the land, led by Aaron Winchester. The graduate transfer from Georgia State is top 5 in the FCS in passer efficiency rating. But this week, his unit faces a stingy Robert Morris pass defense. In NEC games, the Colonials are limiting opponents to 5.4 yards per pass attempt. That is the lowest on the circuit. Now, when it comes to CCSU's defense against the Robert Morris offense, well, the Blue Devils boast the nation's #1 rushing defense, fewer than 65 yards per game allowed on the ground, only 3 rushing touchdowns allowed all season by CCSU. Now, Robert Morris has moved the ball effectively with its ground game in recent weeks. Last week, it was Terrence Stevens going over the century mark. Meanwhile, sophomore Elijah Jackson, 5 100-yard rushing games to his credit. So 2 highly performing units going head-to-head with an NEC title on the line. It doesn't get much better than this, folks. We'll talk more about this game in the Chop Shop. But as for now, set your alerts for Saturday at noontime. NECFrontRow.com is where you'll want to be. Colonials and Blue Devils, championship implications galore. Let's check in on the NEC stock market. I'll tell you whose value is all the way up. Yes, he's leading the NEC in receptions and receiving yards. So by now, he's no surprise, but Rashawn Henry's stock is still rising. St. Francis's 6'2" junior receiver from Texas has made at least 4 receptions in every game this season, and he has been sensational of late. Coming into the season, Henry had just 19 career catches for 241 yards. Well, he has more than that in the past 2 weeks alone. The versatile pass catcher has made exactly 11 catches each of the past 3 games. That's a 3-week total of 535 yards on 33 receptions. For the year, 70 receptions, 876 yards, 6 touchdowns. Rashawn Henry, a junior receiver from St. Francis, putting up eye-popping numbers. His stock is all the way up. Taking the Twitter timeout, a look at the tweet sheet this week, and it's all about Mike Mushaw, the Central Connecticut senior linebacker. Now, there was an incredible side story involving Mushaw, and it unfolded before and during CCSU's Week 11 victory over St. Francis. The game began with a ceremonial coin toss with Mushaw and little Eleanor present. Eleanor is a young girl who Mushaw saved through an anonymous bone marrow donation. Now, as fate would have it, on this special day where Mushaw got to meet little Eleanor for the first time, Mushaw also delivered the victory-clinching sack. He brought down Jason Brown on the last play of overtime, a storybook ending to an incredible day. There was plenty of press coverage about Mushaw and his contributions to the Be the Match program. You can find much of it on Twitter. In particular, I urge you to go to the Hartford Courant's website and take a look at the feature story written by the Courant's Mike Anthony. Just an incredible story, and Anthony did a terrific job of telling it. That's amazing, bruh. What has me in a state of amazement this week? Well, it's turnovers. We're talking turnovers here. First, Sacred Heart. The Pioneers with 8 takeaways in the win over Wagner. That tied the NEC single-game record. Mark Nofri's team with 2 pick-sixes in the win, 4 interceptions, 4 fumbles recovered. It's pretty obvious why the score turned out being what it was. 8 takeaways, nothing to say, but stats amazing. And stats not all, folks. Robert Morris was doing some work in the turnover department. The Colonials with 7 takeaways in the win over Steel City rival Duquesne. And during its recent run, turnovers have been uber important to Robert Morris. The Colonials own a 16-4 turnover margin in 5 NEC games, clearly taking care of the football. Not even 1 giveaway per outing. Now, as far as the defense, RMU, multiple takeaways in each of the past 3 games. The Colonials have 6 wins this year, at least 1 takeaway in each of those 6 wins. In 5 of the 6 victories, they've recorded multiple takeaways. Robert Morris taking care of the ball and taking the ball away from the opponent, and they got the wins to show for it. And stats amazing. As we do every week, we chop it up with Rick Saratella of NFL Draft Bible. Enjoy this week's edition of the NEC Football Chop Shop. Back in the NEC Football Chop Shop, I'm Ralph. He's Rick Saratella, that is, from NFL Draft Bible, also a scout for the NFLPA Bowl. But you guys and gals, you know that already because we've been doing this all season long. And now, down the stretch we come, Rick. Week 11 in the books, 2 weeks to play. A lot happening with the NEC race. What do you got for your game balls from week 11? And then, of course, we'll get into the prime time matchup that awaits in week 12.
Hey, we're rocking and rolling, Ralph. What a season it has been. And as you said, down the stretch they come. The final quarter poll here, it could get crazy. But let's take a look back at this past week. My offensive game ball, Central Connecticut wide receiver, Tayshawn James. He makes it rain. He makes it rain. There's not much this man can't do. He's catching the ball. He's running the ball. He's throwing the ball, Ralph. Another big day. It seems like we talk about him each and every week. 6 catches, 95 receiving yards, a big 48-yard rushing touchdown, bouncing off defenders like a ping pong ball. And then, hey, he even threw a 34-yard pass just for good measure. He now has 5 rushing touchdowns on the season, 12 touchdowns on the year. You saw him make that big one-arm touchdown grab in the back of the end zone in the fourth quarter. Tayshaun James, he is an exciting playmaker. He's got a 912 all-purpose yards, Ralph, averaging over 21 yards per catch. Once again, earning my NEC offensive game ball.
Yeah, he's been a home run hitter this year. And, you mentioned that pass, 34-yard pass. That was actually the first completion of the game. He comes around on what looks like a reverse, but it's a wide receiver option pass, and then he throws a strike downfield, 34 yards in the air. So just an incredible athlete, and it seems that Central has found the right way to use him. They found multiple ways to use him. Really, what a threat on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm right there with you on that one, Rick. Good choice for the offensive game ball.
Yeah, and, listen, we got a good one on defense too now, Ralph. Rumor has it there was a pair of glass slippers left behind in the Robert Morris locker room after that Duquesne game last week. It's just been a Cinderella roller coaster ride for this squad. And we got to give a hat tip to the safety, Mason, big play Gray, the transfer coming over from Albany, following his head coach to Robert Morris, 2 interceptions for a touchdown, 7 turnovers on the day for that Colonials defense. But Mason Gray taking it to the house, 2 pick-six, 4 tackles, a forced fumble, another pass breakup for good measure. In fact, this playmaking safety now has 2 games in which he's had 15 tackles, Ralph. I think he's got 78 tackles now on the season. Here's a guy sat out all of last season due to a shoulder injury, transferred to Robert Morris. Just a tremendous comeback story, and now one of the key cogs on that Colonial defense.
Yeah, Mason Gray, big play safety. As you mentioned, returned 2 interceptions for touchdowns, and he's actually only the second player in Robert Morris history with 2 pick-sixes in the same game. The other occasion, it happened some years ago against Buffalo State. So actually Mason Gray, the first RMU Colonial with 2 pick-sixes in a game against a D1 opponent. So he made some program history, and of course the Colonials are on the cusp of making history. They could win an NEC title after being picked next to last in the preseason coaches poll. They're at 5-0, and if they get a victory this week, they will be the NEC's recipient of an automatic bid to the FCS playoffs, and I'm pretty sure that's your Week 12 game to watch.
No doubt about it. I mean, no questions asked here. 2 undefeated teams in conference play. Of course, Central Connecticut is going to be a daunting task once again for this Robert Morris squad. Central 9-1 on the season, 19th in that Stats FCS rankings. So this will be the biggest challenge for Robert Morris yet. But guess what? Bernard Clark, the buck stopped with Bernard, and he's no stranger to adversity. Of course, 88 Rose Bowl or Orange Bowl MVP gets called upon. Dave Wanstead goes to him, says, Bernard, you're up due to injury. Hadn't started a game all season. Comes out the MVP, and, they were predicted to finish 7th in the conference, Ralph. Nobody saw this coming. They were predicted to finish 7th out of 8 teams, and I love the history here. He didn't realize he wanted to get involved in coaching. Back in the late 90s, he was hanging out in Florida, Lakewood, Florida. His friend asked him, hey, can you help me coach out my high school team? Got the coaching itch. Went and spent a season with Wanstead on that Pittsburgh staff and cut his teeth working his way up through the coaching ranks. We mentioned defensive coordinator at Albany before coming to Robert Morris. And, you spoke to him at the media day, and he said, this team just needs to have a change of culture. They need to finish. The team didn't finish last year. And then I spoke to the playmaking tight end, Matthew Gonzalez, and he said, Coach Clark holds us accountable. And there's been a new maturity of this team, a new responsibility of this team. And the one thing that resonated with me, Ralph, he said, it's not about the X's and O's. It's about the Jimmies and Joes.
Yeah, and that philosophy is paying dividends for Bernard Clark, because he certainly has the Colonials believing, and not only are they believing, but they're performing too. And I don't know if it was Parcells or one of these old-time football coaches, they would say, you are what your record says you are, and the Colonials are 5-0 in the NEC, but so are the CCSU Blue Devils, nationally ranked, and as you mentioned, they will be a tough test at home this week for Robert Morris. I mean, this is just a matchup that true football fans will salivate over. I mean, it's a mouth-watering matchup of matchups. So I'm pretty pumped up for this one, Rick. I know you are as well. Robert Morris in Central Connecticut in the next to last week of the season. Weather's getting cooler. I mean, this is what it's all about.
You don't get better than this, Ralph. And, we've talked about Aaron Winchester. Of course, we mentioned Tyshawn James, the offensive game ball of the week, the freshman playmaker, Kyron Petaway, we mentioned in the past. But
caught the winning touchdown in their overtime win against the Red Flash in Week 11, Petaway. So, they're getting contributions from all over. They're scary on the defensive side of the ball, too.
And they had some adversity last week. Robert Morris playing in front for once. We talked about the 4 consecutive second half comeback from behind victories, but the magic carpet ride keeps on churning. And one other thing I want to point out, we talk about Coach Schmidt over at Duquesne, what a great coach he is. Last week, Clark outcoached him. Did you see the onside kick? He noticed Duquesne 15 yards off the ball, switched it up in the first quarter, I think it was, kicked that onside kick, and the kicker actually winded up recovering. It was a big momentum changer, and you need a little bit of luck. Hey, we talked about Matt Gonzalez. All he does is make plays. How about that one-hand catch? I think it was a third down conversion, goes up in the air and just makes that mystical, magical catch.
Incredible.
This is a thriller. This is going to be some hard-hitting football come Saturday in New Britain.
And right before I let you go, I just wanted to mention, because you had spoke about that onside kick that Robert Morris converted in Week 11, and that's not been the first time that the Robert Morris special teams have caught another team, have caught an opponent by surprise. A fake field goal for a big first down in a road win over Wagner. They've been doing a lot with that special teams unit. So hats off to the Colonials in that regard. And be great to see them go up against Central Connecticut in Week 12 live on NEC Front Row. For now, this was the Week 12 NEC Football Chop Shop. My thanks, as always, to Rick Saratella of NFL Draft Bible. He's Rick. I'm Ralph. Thank you for watching the NEC Football Chop Shop. So now you're ready for Week 12 of Northeast Conference football. All 9 teams, 3 conference games, 6 games total, plenty of action on Front Row, a featured matchup on ESPN3. It doesn't get any better than this. Until next week, I'm Ralph Ventre. Thank you for watching the whole 9 yards.